Emily Carter had built her life around quiet strength, early mornings, tired hands, and whispered lullabies to two growing children. Love, she believed, was something meant for someone else, someone with fewer scars. Her days were full of work, her nights full of silence. And yet, life had a way of changing when she least expected it. One afternoon, in a place she'd nearly forgotten to believe in, something, or someone, stepped quietly into her world. And that's when everything began to change. Stay tuned because you're about to watch a beautiful story and find out what happened next. Hello, family. Welcome to Storytime Mutually. Kindly subscribe to my YouTube channel, like, and share this video to your friends and loved ones. Your support and engagement encourage me to post more videos. Thank you as you do so. Sit back, relax as we dive into the story. The rain had been falling all day in Seattle. The sky was heavy and gray, like it had forgotten how to smile. From the third-floor window of a small apartment building in the south side of the city, Emily Carter sat on the old brown couch that sagged in the middle. Her hands were wrapped around a chipped coffee mug, the steam long gone cold. She stared outside in silence, watching raindrops race each other down the glass. Behind her, the apartment was quiet, too quiet. The walls were thin, the floors creaked, and nothing inside really matched. But it was home, at least for now. A soft cough came from the small bedroom down the hall. It was Liam, her 7-year-old son. He had been fighting off a cold. His older sister, Sophie, had tucked him in earlier, whispering bedtime stories she'd made up just for him. Emily smiled faintly at the thought. She was proud of them. They were her heart. But she was tired. Deeply, painfully tired. Her days started before the sun and ended long after it disappeared behind the buildings. She cleaned houses during the day, scrubbing floors, folding laundry, scrubbing toilets that weren't her own. At night, she rushed to the small diner where she worked as a waitress, pouring coffee for strangers and pretending their jokes didn't sting. She did it all without complaint because she had to. There was no one else. Emily had once believed in love. Once, long ago, when she was only 21 and full of dreams, she had married her high school sweetheart. He had told her she was his world. She believed him. They had Sophie a year later, and 2 years after that Liam came along. Life was hard even then, but she had hope. Until the night he didn't come home. He left a note. No explanation, no goodbye to the kids. Just words scribbled on torn paper. I'm sorry. I can't do this anymore. Emily never saw him again. She cried for weeks. Not because she missed him, at least not the man he had become, but because she was scared. Scared to be alone. Scared to raise 2 children with no support. Scared that maybe she wasn't enough. 3 years had passed since that night. 3 birthdays. 3 Christmases. And not once had he called to ask about Sophie or Liam. Some nights, when the kids were asleep and the silence pressed in too hard, she cried into her pillow. Quietly, so they wouldn't hear. Outside, a car splashed through a puddle, and Emily blinked, pulled back into the present. She took a sip from her mug, cold, bitter. She didn't even notice anymore. A part of her had stopped dreaming. There was no time for dreams. Love? That felt like something from another life. Something she didn't deserve now. She had children. She had baggage. She had too many scars. No one wants a woman like me, she whispered once, to her own reflection in the bathroom mirror. I'm too tired. Too broken. But even then, even on the worst nights, there was a small light in her chest that refused to go out. A tiny piece of hope that whispered, maybe one day someone will see you. Not for your past. Not for your pain. But for your heart. That night, as the rain kept falling and the clock ticked past midnight, Emily tiptoed into the kids' room. The space was small, with 2 twin beds and a single shelf full of second-hand books. Sophie was curled under her blanket, hugging her stuffed bear close. Liam had kicked off his sheets, one sock dangling from his foot. She gently pulled the blanket over him and brushed a soft kiss to his forehead. I love you, she whispered. She didn't need anyone to say it back. Her love was enough for them all. But deep inside, her heart still waited for the day someone might love her. 2. The next morning, the rain had stopped. Seattle skies were still cloudy, but soft sunlight peeked through the gray, lighting up the wet streets below. The air smelled fresh, like the world had taken a deep breath and was ready to begin again. Emily stood in the kitchen, pouring cereal into 2 chipped bowls. Sophie sat at the small table, swinging her legs and humming to herself. Liam, wrapped in a blanket, sniffled and leaned against his mother's side, still sleepy-eyed but smiling. "How's the nose bug?" she asked gently, brushing his brown hair back. "Better," Liam mumbled. "Can we go to the library today?" Emily hesitated. She had laundry to fold, dishes in the sink, and she was already behind on tomorrow's schedule. But when she looked at Liam's hopeful eyes and saw Sophie perk up at the question, she gave in. "All right," she said with a soft smile. "Just for a little while." By noon, the 3 of them were walking down the block to the public library. It was a familiar routine. They visited almost every week, especially when there wasn't money for anything else. Books didn't cost a thing, and inside those pages, her children could go anywhere they dreamed. The library stood like an old friend on the corner of Main Street, tall windows, warm lights, and a quiet welcome that always wrapped around her like a hug. As they entered, the scent of old paper and clean wood calmed her. It was one of the few places where her mind didn't feel heavy. Sophie ran ahead to the children's corner, where bean bags and colorful shelves waited. Liam clutched her hand tightly as they followed. As she helped Liam search for a picture book about animals, a calm voice interrupted. "Excuse me, is this seat taken?" Emily turned quickly. A man stood beside the reading bench. He looked to be in his mid-30s, with a worn gray sweater, dark jeans, and a notebook under one arm. His short brown hair was a little messy, like he'd been running his fingers through it, and his eyes, deep brown, kind, met hers softly. "No, go ahead," Emily said, moving slightly to the side. He gave a polite nod and sat down, flipping open his notebook and pulling out a pencil. She tried to ignore him and focus on Liam, who had now picked out 3 books, including one about whales that he insisted she read aloud later. But after a few minutes, she noticed Sophie walking up to the man and peering at his drawings. "Are you an artist?" she asked boldly. He smiled, surprised but amused. "Sort of. I write and draw children's books." Sophie's eyes widened. "Like real books?" He chuckled. "Like real books." Liam joined in, holding up the book he had picked. "Can you draw a whale?" The man took the challenge with a laugh and sketched a quick, silly cartoon whale in his notebook. Both kids giggled. Emily watched quietly, unsure of what to say. Part of her wanted to pull the children away. She didn't like them talking to strangers. But the man didn't seem like the others she had met before. There was no pretending in his smile. No charm or smooth talk. Just simple kindness. He glanced up at her. "I hope they're not bothering you." "Not at all," she replied. "They usually don't talk to strangers." "Well, I'm honored," he said with a smile. "I'm Daniel, by the way." Emily hesitated. Then slowly she said, "Emily." He didn't ask anything more. No awkward questions. No, "Where's the dad?" Or "Are you married?" Just a quiet understanding in the way he looked at her, like he didn't need to know her story to see that it was heavy. They sat like that for a while. The kids continued to talk to him, laughing at his silly drawings and trying to guess what animals he'd sketch next. Emily listened, and slowly, against her own instincts, she found herself smiling. It had been a long time since someone made her children laugh like that. After an hour, she told them it was time to go. The kids pouted, but didn't complain. As she stood to leave, Daniel spoke softly. "I'll be here next Saturday, working on more sketches if you're around." Emily didn't answer right away, but she nodded once. And as they stepped out of the library and into the cool air, Sophie looked up at her and said, "Mommy, he was nice." Emily squeezed her hand gently. "Yes," she said quietly. "He was." That night, as the children slept and the sky turned dark again, Emily sat by her window. But this time, she didn't look at the rain with sadness. Instead, she thought about the man at the library with the kind eyes and simple smile. She didn't know what it meant yet, but maybe, just maybe, The world was starting to open up again. The days passed slowly, and life carried on the way it always did. Emily woke early, packed school lunches, dropped off Sophie and Liam at school, cleaned houses, then rushed to her evening shift at the diner. She smiled for customers even when her feet hurt. She counted coins in her hand each night, praying it would be enough for bills and groceries. But something had changed since Saturday. It was small, a thought that stayed in the back of her mind. A moment she kept returning to when the day felt too heavy. Daniel. She didn't know why, but the memory of his voice, his laugh, the way he had gently made space for her and her children without forcing anything, it stayed with her. She hadn't felt that warmth in years, and it scared her a little. The following Saturday came with soft sunlight and the first signs of spring. The kids remembered immediately. "Are we going to the library today?" Sophie asked before breakfast, her eyes wide with excitement. "I want to see the whale man again," Liam said, already pulling on his socks even though he was still in his pajamas. Emily smiled, shaking her head. "Whale man. That's what I call him," Liam said proudly. "He draws whales." She laughed quietly. It felt good to laugh like that. "All right," she said. "Let's get ready." At the library, Daniel was already there, sitting in the same spot, a coffee beside him and his notebook open. When he saw them walk in, he smiled like he'd been waiting all week just to see them. "Hey," he said softly. "Hi," Emily replied, suddenly shy. The kids ran straight over, hugging him like an old friend. Daniel ruffled Liam's hair and handed Sophie a sheet of paper with a drawing of her as a princess holding a sword. She squealed with delight. "That's me." Emily sat down slowly, unsure of what to say. She wasn't used to this kind of attention, especially not from a man. Most had either looked through her or made her feel like a burden. But Daniel wasn't like that. He was calm, gentle. He didn't push. "You're good with them," Emily said after a while, watching the kids giggle over another drawing. "I like kids," Daniel said, smiling. "I always thought I'd have some of my own. But life didn't quite go that way." There was a quiet moment. "What happened?" she asked softly, then quickly added, "Sorry. That's too personal." "No, it's okay," Daniel said. He looked down at his coffee for a moment before speaking again. "I was married once. She was sick for a long time. Cancer. We fought it together for 2 years, but she passed away 5 years ago." Emily's heart sank. "I'm sorry." He nodded, his eyes distant for a second. "Thank you. It was hard. I stopped writing for a long time after that. But then I started coming here. Drawing again. Slowly." He looked at her now, directly. "And then, I met you." Emily didn't know what to say. Her heart beat a little faster, but she didn't understand why. She had trained herself not to feel these things anymore, not to get pulled in, not to hope. "I'm just a mom," she said quietly. "A tired one, with too many problems and not enough time." Daniel looked at her with something gentle in his eyes, something that saw past the words she just said. "You're more than that," he replied. Over the next few weeks, they kept meeting at the library. The kids would play and draw, and Emily and Daniel would sit on the bench and talk. Nothing was rushed. Nothing was expected. It felt natural, safe. One day, after her evening shift at the diner, Emily walked out into the cold night and found Daniel leaning against the light pole across the street. She stopped in surprise. "What are you doing here?" "I was nearby and thought I'd wait," he said. "I figured you could use someone to walk with." Emily looked down at her shoes, unsure of how to respond. "I hope that's okay," he added quickly. She nodded slowly. "Yeah, it's okay." They walked together in silence for a while. The streets were quiet, the sky full of stars. Daniel held a paper bag in one hand. "What's that?" she asked. "Dinner," he said with a small smile. "You've been on your feet all night. Thought maybe you forgot to eat." She stopped walking. Nobody brought her food. Nobody waited outside her job just to walk her home. Nobody had thought of her like that in a long, long time. She looked at him, her voice barely a whisper. "Why are you being so kind to me?" Daniel met her eyes. "Because you deserve it." That night, when Emily got home and opened the bag, she found a warm sandwich and a note on top of the napkin. It said, Even the strongest people need someone to lean on sometimes. Daniel. She didn't eat right away. She sat at the table, staring at the note, and let the tears fall silently. Not because she was sad, but because, for the first time in a very long time, she felt seen. That night, after the children were tucked into bed, Emily sat alone in the kitchen, holding the note Daniel had written. The sandwich was gone, but the feeling it brought had stayed with her. It wasn't just about the food. It was the thought, the care, the gentle way he had stepped into her world without trying to take over it. She read the words again. Even the strongest people need someone to lean on sometimes. Her hands trembled slightly as she folded the napkin and tucked it into her drawer. She didn't know why she wanted to keep it, only that it mattered. Over the next few weeks, Daniel became a soft, steady part of her life. He never rushed her. He never asked for anything. He just showed up. At the library, he brought puzzles for the kids and made them laugh with silly voices. Sometimes he'd wait outside the diner, holding 2 cups of coffee, one for himself, one for her. He didn't ask to come inside. He just walked her home talking about small things. Books, music, the weather. And little by little, Emily let her walls down. One Saturday afternoon, as they sat at the park near the library, Daniel pulled a small sketch pad from his bag and handed it to Liam. "I've been working on a new story," he said, "but I need a helper to color the drawings." Liam's eyes lit up. "Me?" "Yes, you," Daniel said with a smile. "You have a good eye for colors. And your sister is already my editor." Sophie giggled, proud and important. Emily sat nearby on the bench, watching them play. The wind was gentle. The trees whispered softly above them. For once, she felt like she could breathe. Daniel sat down beside her. "They're amazing kids," he said. "Thank you," Emily replied, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "They're all I have." Daniel glanced at her, quiet for a moment. Then he asked, "And what about you?" She frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" "I mean, who takes care of you?" Emily looked away. No one had asked her that before. The question made her chest tighten. "I take care of myself," she said softly. "I always have." Daniel nodded slowly. "You shouldn't have to do it alone." But not every day was easy. There were still nights when bills didn't add up, when Liam cried with a fever, when Sophie got teased at school for wearing the same jacket again. Emily still carried the weight of a life that had left too many bruises on her heart. One evening, after a long, hard day, Emily snapped. It wasn't Daniel's fault. He had come by the diner, offering to walk her home like always. But she was tired, bone-tired, and her emotions were running too high. "Daniel, I can't do this right now," she said sharply as they walked down the street. "I don't have time for whatever this is." He stopped walking. "Okay," he said gently. "Do you want me to go?" She didn't answer. Her eyes filled with tears, and she turned away, ashamed of how easily her fear had taken over. He stepped forward, but didn't touch her. "Emily, I know your heart is tired. I'm not here to fix you. I just care." "I'm scared," she whispered. "I've been let down so many times. I don't want to need someone who might leave." Daniel's voice was quiet. "I won't leave." She turned to him then, finally meeting his eyes. There was no promise in his voice. No flashy words or dramatic speeches. Just truth. And she felt it in her bones. He meant it. A week later, Liam got sick again. A high fever, cough, and restless sleep. Emily stayed home from work and sat by his bed, placing wet cloths on his forehead and trying to keep calm. Sophie helped as best she could, holding her brother's hand and reading him stories. Emily's phone buzzed. It was Daniel. "Daniel, how's Liam?" She hesitated before typing. "Emily, he's burning up. I'm scared." He didn't reply right away, but 20 minutes later, there was a knock at the door. Emily opened it to find Daniel holding a grocery bag. Inside, children's medicine, orange juice, crackers, and a small teddy bear. She stared at the bag, speechless. "I thought you could use some help," he said softly. Tears filled her eyes again, but this time, they didn't fall from fear. They fell from relief. You didn't have to. I wanted to. He stayed for hours. He read books to Liam while Emily rested her eyes on the couch. He braided Sophie's hair and made her laugh again. He made sure Emily drank water, made her sit down, made her breathe. That night, as the children slept and the apartment was quiet, Emily sat on the floor near the couch. Daniel sat across from her. "Why me?" she asked suddenly. "Why are you doing all this?" He looked at her with calm, steady eyes.
"Because I see you, Emily.
Not just a tired mother. Not just a woman with pain. I see your heart, and I'm not afraid of it." Emily's voice trembled. "But I am." Daniel leaned forward, voice low and sure. "Then let me be brave for both of us." And in that quiet room, beneath a flickering ceiling light, something beautiful broke inside Emily. Not in a painful way, but in a freeing way, like a locked door opening after years of silence.
She didn't speak again that night.
She didn't need to, but for the first time in years, she didn't feel alone. The days that followed were quieter.
Softer.
Liam's fever broke 2 days after Daniel brought the medicine. Emily watched her son slowly return to his cheerful self, his laughter returning like sunshine after a storm. Sophie, ever the little helper, made get-well cards and placed them beside Liam's pillow. Daniel didn't come every day, but he checked in. A text, a phone call, a knock on the door with warm soup and a soft smile. He never stayed too long unless invited. He never asked for more than she could give. And Emily began to feel something she hadn't felt in years.
Peace.
One Friday evening, Emily stood at the stove, making grilled cheese sandwiches for dinner. Sophie and Liam were on the floor nearby, coloring pictures of superheroes and castles. There was a knock at the door. Sophie jumped up and ran to it before Emily could stop her. She peeked through the peephole. "It's Daniel," she squealed. Emily wiped her hands quickly and opened the door, smiling despite herself. He was holding a small bag in one hand and a folded piece of paper in the other. "I brought something for the kids," he said. "And maybe something for you too." Inside the bag was a box of colored pencils, a sketch pad for Sophie, and a mini science kit for Liam. But the note, that was for Emily. He handed it to her gently. "Read it later, when you're alone." She looked at him, curious, but said nothing. "You want to stay for dinner?" she asked softly. "Only if I get a grilled cheese," he joked. She laughed and stepped aside. "Come in." That evening felt different. They sat at the small table, squeezed together, laughing and eating like they had done this for years. Emily noticed how easily Daniel fit in now. He listened to Sophie talk about her day at school, helped Liam figure out how to use the science kit, and always looked at Emily like she mattered. When the kids were finally asleep, Emily walked him to the door.
"Thank you," she said.
"For what?" "For not giving up on me." Daniel smiled, and for a moment, he looked nervous. He pulled something from his jacket pocket. It wasn't a ring. It was a small black box, but thinner. Inside was a silver chain with 3 tiny charms, an E, an S, and an L. Emily gasped, her hand going to her chest. "I saw it and thought, maybe it belongs to you," he said. Her eyes filled with tears. "It's beautiful." "There's something else," he said, his voice more serious now. "Can we go somewhere tomorrow? Just us." Emily's heart skipped. "What do you mean?" "Not far. Just, I want to show you something. And I want to talk. No pressure. No big expectations. Just you and me." She nodded slowly. "Okay." The next afternoon, Daniel picked her up in his old pickup truck. They drove out of the city, into the quiet edges where trees lined the roads and birdsong replaced traffic. Emily felt nervous, unsure why her heart beat so fast. They stopped at a small open field near a lake. A blanket was spread out beneath a tall oak tree. A picnic basket waited. She looked at him, surprised. "You planned all this?" "I needed a little peace, and I thought you might too," he said. They sat under the tree, watching the water shimmer under the soft sunlight. "I was scared to bring you here," Daniel admitted after a while. "Because I didn't want to rush anything. But I've been holding something in." Emily turned to him, her breath quiet. "I love you, Emily." Her chest tightened. "I love the way you love your children." The way you fight through your pain without losing your heart. I love how you've let me in little by little, even though it's been hard. I don't need perfection. I just want real. I want you." Tears rolled down Emily's cheeks before she could stop them. She wiped at her face, trembling. "I'm scared," she whispered. "I know," he said gently, "but I'm not going anywhere." He reached into the basket and pulled out a small velvet pouch. This time, it wasn't a necklace. It wasn't a ring either. It was a folded paper with a drawing, Emily, Sophie, and Liam, all standing together, smiling. Daniel stood beside them, holding their hands. At the bottom were 4 words, written in Daniel's neat handwriting. "Will you choose me?" Emily held the paper close to her chest. "I don't have much to give," she whispered. "Just a small apartment, a tired heart, and 2 kids who still cry at night." Daniel leaned closer. "That's everything I want." She didn't answer with words. She leaned forward, wrapped her arms around him, and held him tighter than she had held anyone in years. And in that moment, something inside her said yes. Not with fear, but with love. Emily sat beside Daniel beneath the old oak tree, holding the drawing close to her heart. The lake shimmered behind them, the breeze brushing through her hair. It felt like the world had gone still, quiet, safe, full of warmth. She had not planned to say yes. She had not thought herself ready. But the words he spoke, the way he saw her, the patience he gave, something inside her had opened, like a locked door letting in sunlight for the first time in years. When she pulled back from their hug, her eyes still shining with quiet tears, she whispered, "Yes." Daniel smiled, and for a moment, he didn't say anything. He just looked at her, as if trying to remember every detail of this moment. The weeks that followed moved gently, like spring waking up the earth. Daniel became a permanent part of their lives, not by force, but by love. He didn't move in right away. Emily asked for time, and Daniel respected that. But he was always near. He picked up Sophie from school when Emily had long shifts. He helped Liam with math homework. On rainy days, he brought games and puzzles and taught them how to bake cookies from scratch. The apartment, though still small and mismatched, began to feel warmer. One quiet evening, while folding laundry, Emily looked around and realized something she hadn't dared believe. They were a family now. Not a perfect one. Not the one she once dreamed of. But a real one. And somehow, that felt even better. One Sunday morning, Daniel took them all to the botanical gardens outside the city. Flowers bloomed in every color. The kids ran ahead, chasing butterflies and laughing. Emily and Daniel walked slowly, hands brushing now and then. "I've been thinking," he said. Emily looked at him, her heart already guessing where this was going. "I want to do this forever," he said. "The school runs, the bedtime stories, the tough days, the quiet ones, all of it." He paused, nervous now. "I don't have a big house or a fancy job, but I have love. For you, for Sophie, for Liam, and I want to give it every day." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple gold ring. No diamond, no shine, just a smooth band. "Will you marry me, Emily Carter?" She stared at the ring, her breath caught. Memories flashed behind her eyes, the lonely nights, the pain, the broken dreams. But they were no longer chains. They were roads that led her here. To this moment. She took the ring, her hands shaking, and smiled through happy tears. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, we will." Their wedding was not grand. It was held in the same park near the library, where their story had truly begun. A white arch made of flowers stood beneath the wide open sky. Sophie wore a light pink dress and carried a basket of petals. Liam wore a tiny suit and grinned from ear to ear. Emily wore a simple white dress, one she found on sale, and Daniel wore his best navy blue shirt. The people who had once seen her cry in quiet corners now stood smiling, holding tissues and wiping their eyes. As she walked down the grassy aisle, holding Sophie and Liam's hands, Emily looked at Daniel, and he looked at her like she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. They said their vows with shaking voices. They kissed as husband and wife. And the moment the ceremony ended, Sophie ran into Daniel's arms shouting, "We're a real family now." Daniel lifted her up, laughing with tears in his eyes. Emily watched them, heart full. Her chest felt light, open, whole. That night, as they sat together on the small couch at home, her head on his shoulder, the kids asleep down the hall, Daniel whispered, "You're not alone anymore." She smiled, eyes closed, holding his hand. "I know." Outside, the stars glowed softly in the night sky. No more rain, no more fear, just love. A love that had waited. A love that had found her when she thought it never would. And this time,
It was here to stay.
that brings us to the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you do, kindly subscribe to my channel, like, and share this video to your friends and loved ones. Also comment what you feel about the story under the comment section. Thanks for watching.